Hey guys, Nukrov here, back at it again with another deck profile. This time we're going to be doing Blue Eyes Chaos Dragons, which is a really nice deck. It might be one of my favorite decks that I've actually played in a long time. So let's get right into it. This is actually like a ritual build of Blue Eyes, kind of mixed with like the new Chaos Dragons that got unbanned. So let's get into it. So first off, of course, we're going to be starting off with our 3 copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon, the most vanilla of all monsters, very important in the deck for a number of different reasons. Next, we've got one of our boss monsters, Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, of course. It can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects, and it does double piercing damage. Really great boss monster that goes great along with our 1 copy of Blue Eyes Chaos Dragon. Chaos Dragon, when it attacks, it switches all of your opponent's battle positions, all of your opponent's monsters' battle positions, and changes it to 0. Next up, we do actually run 1 copy of Relinquished. This is a great way to just take your opponent's monsters. It can take face-down monsters as well, so you can really just kind of get rid of problems with this with Relinquished, and it's a lot easier to bring out in this deck than, say, Borreload Dragon or even Thousand Eyes Restrict. Next up, we run 2 copies of Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon. This is a great free special summon. You just reveal the vanilla Blue Eyes from your hand and special summon this guy from your hand. You can only do that once per turn, and it also has a really nice destruction effect, but it can't attack if you use that effect. But a really great card overall. Next up, we're actually running 2 copies of Incantation Candle and 1 copy of Incantation Talismandra. We only need the 1 Talismandra because a lot of our ritual monsters, except for Relinquished, can actually be searched with other search cards that we have in this deck. So we don't need to search for monsters as much, but searching for ritual spells is very important in this deck, so you do want to run, sorry if I can English, the 2 Candles. Next up, we actually run 1 Skull Servant in this deck. The reason why we're running Skull Servant, it's just a Garnet for advanced ritual art, so that way you can bring out Relinquished. I just thought Skull Servant was like the best level 1 to put in here, just because he's Skull Servant. You guys know I have a soft spot for that deck. Next up, we have 1 copy of the White Stone of Legend. This is to have discard fodder so that you can add more Blue Eyes monsters to your hand. That's immensely important in this deck, so it's really nice to just have a card that you can use to get more hand presence. Next up, we're going to be running 1 copy of Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, 1 copy of Chaos Dragon Levianeer, and the big daddy in this deck, Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End. A lot of people have been saying that Chaos Emperor Dragon, even though it is back at 1, that it's not really as strong as it used to be, which is true, but I think that is still a monster of an effect. So its new errata is it has the same effect, but you can't activate any cards or effects the turn you activate that card. You can still battle and you can normal summon, but you can't special summon or anything or use any effects. Which is still absolutely devastating if you know what you're doing with this deck. This deck sends monsters to the graveyard all the time, and they're all light and dark types, so he's not going to be a problem to bring out if you just happen to draw him in your hand. Same with any of these guys. Blackluster Soldier can banish a monster on the field but can't attack that turn, or if it does battle, you can attack again in a row if it destroys a monster. And Chaos Dragon Levianeer has a couple different effects based on what you're going to be banishing from the graveyard. If it's only light monsters, you can special summon a monster from the graveyard. If it's only dark, you can shuffle 1 random card in your opponent's hand back into the deck. And if it's both light and dark for all 3, then you can destroy 2 cards on the field and it doesn't target, which is really nice in this deck. All 3 of these guys are kind of like alternate boss monsters. They're all level 8, so they work great with like trade-in if they're dead in your hand, so they're not really ever dead in your hand. Then we run 3 copies of Chaos Form. This is your most basic ritual spell, and best of all, it can banish Blue Eyes from the graveyard, which works just perfectly in a deck where we're using a lot of Chaos monsters, so we're going to be banishing a lot anyways. Also, yeah, I mean, Chaos Form is just great for this deck. It can even be used for like other rituals, I think, like Blackluster Soldier rituals, but I'm not sure if any that would work in this deck are really that good in general. Next up, we run 3 copies of the Melody of Awakening Dragon. This is a great card just for searching anything, essentially. You can't search, like, Blackluster Soldier with this, but you can search Levianeer and Chaos Emperor Dragon, as well as all of the main Blue Eyes monsters, like Chaos Max, the Vanilla Alternative, any of those you can search with this. Also, to go right along with that theme is our 3 copies of Return of the Dragon Lords. Again, this is for level 7s and 8s. You can't revive like Chaos Max with this or Chaos Emperor Dragon, but you can revive like Levianeer or your alternative if it was properly special summoned, so it does still really help in this deck. Next up for draw power, we do run 3 copies of Trade-In as well. It's just a basic draw card, you know, it's just good to have this card in any Blue Eyes deck, just in general. Next up, we run 2 copies of Advanced Ritual Art. This is our way that we're bringing out both Relinquished, Chaos Max, Chaos Dragon, all of those guys. This is why we run Skull Servant in the deck, is so that we can send Skull Servant to the graveyard to summon Relinquished. How Advanced Ritual Art works is that you send a normal monster to the graveyard whose level is exactly the monster that you're trying to bring out. So just running that 1 copy of Skull Servant is going to be really helpful. Next up, you run 1 copy of Creature Swap. This is a great card. Just in general, it takes your opponent's monsters, and if you happen to have an Incantation and a Chaos Max, that's essentially game. You just give them the Incantation and run into it for 8,000 damage. So, yeah, it's kind of a stupid combo, but it's really fun as well. Next up, we run 1 copy of Bingo Machine Go. This is just our other search card if we want to search our like Chaos forms or any of our Blue Eyes monsters, for example, which is just going to really help us out. You only need the 1 because you're doing a lot of searching in this deck already, and you're not going to really need to use Bingo Machine all that often unless you get it like in your opening hand. Next up, we run 1 copy of Monster Gate. Now, the reason why we're running Monster Gate is because this really helps with the Chaos Dragons, especially. Your Ritual Monsters and your Chaos Dragons cannot be normal summoned, so this card will not special summon them, and it'll send them to the graveyard, which is really helpful if you actually have a Chaos Dragon in your hand, because it'll just send more ammo to the graveyard. That way you can get your Chaos Monster out. Also, it just helps with like deck thinning if you're really trying to like kind of turbo your deck. We do have a couple other cards that kind of act like this, like Monster Gate, so it helps a lot if you can just mass dump stuff to the graveyard. Next up, we run 1 copy of Twin Twisters. You got to have some spell and trap removal. This deck isn't really great at spell and trap removal. It's really good at just hitting hard, so a copy of Twin Twisters is always needed. Copy of Monster Reborn. We don't have Soul Charge anymore, so having the 1 copy of Monster Reborn is going to be really important in this deck, even though you have your 3 copies of Return of the Dragon Lords. This will help you revive a lot of other stuff like your extra deck monsters, which cannot be summoned off of that, so yeah. Next we run 1 copy of Regeki. It's Regeki, it just helps us win games. Next up is a really nice personal tech option of mine, and our first trap is Needlebug Nest. So this card just mills the top 5 cards of your deck into the graveyard. Now, with the Chaos Monsters being legal now, all of them, it's just nice to be able to mill. It helps you turbo them out, especially on your opponent's turn, so that if you're trying to say summon Chaos Emperor Dragon, you can flip this card on your opponent's turn and mill those cards into the graveyard, and you don't have to worry about activating any effects to summon, say, Chaos Emperor Dragon. So that really helps out with those turbos. And lastly, for the main deck, we have 2 copies of Eradicator Epidemic Virus. This is to help with like Altergeist and Skystriker matchups specifically. It's a really strong card, and honestly, like I said, you guys are going to be getting into the graveyard a lot. So tributing like your Chaos Max or even Chaos Levianeer or Emperor Dragon with this, just to stop your opponent and completely shut down their deck potentially for 3 turns is absolutely huge. So that's really nice that we have that in there. So that is actually it for the main deck, if I can just get this organized with one hand here. There we go. And let's move on to the extra deck. So we run 2 copies of Nightmare Phoenix. This is kind of important because, as I mentioned earlier, you're not going to be able to remove spell and traps very easily with this deck. So just having the 2 Phoenix instead of like a Phoenix and a Cerberus, I think is just a really nice touch to this deck that helps it out a lot. Next, we run 2 copies of Saryuja Skuldred. As long as this card is at 3, I'm going to be using it pretty much at 2 in most decks. It's such a great link for if you just want to continue your combos and just keep going deeper and deeper into your deck. It's a wonderful card, and I think most decks should be running at least 1 or 2 of these. And lastly, for our links, we're going to be running one copy of Borreload Dragon just to help us, remove monsters on the field so that we can kill our opponent, essentially. For the first synchro on our deck, we're going to be running one copy of Blue Eye Spirit Dragon. You have the White Stone of Legend in here, and you have two effect veilers that are in the side deck as well, so he's not hard to bring out whatsoever. He stops your opponent from special... He stops both players, actually, from special summoning more than 2 monsters at a time. So this really helps with like pendulum matchups, especially. Yeah, and it just helps with really any deck that actually just mass special summons all at once. I can't think of too many now that Soul Charge is banned, but we'll have to see. I do really like this card for the pendulum matchup, though. Next up, we're going to be running one copy of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. This is for our Waking the Dragon targets. I am supposed to have 2 copies of Waking the Dragon here. I just cannot find them at the moment. They're just hidden within my binders somewhere. But we do have a couple of those targets. We have a Crystal Wing. We have our Beals of the Diabolic Dragons, our Black Rose Dragon, as well as our Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon. These are wonderful cards if you just need a quick special summon. You're going to be using enough back row to Awaken the Dragon is a viable side deck option in this deck, and it's really nice to just have your extra deck loaded with a lot of tools that you can use when you need to side that in. Next up, you run one copy of Heretic Sun Dragon Overlord. This guy is really nice that you can tribute monsters from both your hand and your field. Again, it helps with your graveyard. And you can destroy that many cards on the field, and it does not target. So, yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. It's a really powerful card. Next, we run one copy of Hope Harbinger Dragon Titanic Galaxy. This negates spell cards, essentially, is what you use this for. Yeah, it's really good at what it does. And then we also run the Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord for monster effects if we need that. And then we also, to finish off the extra deck, we have the Full Armor Photon Dragon and the Galaxy Eyes Dark Matter Dragon. Just to finish off the Galaxy Eyes, you guys already know what these guys do. You go into Photon Lord, you can negate a monster effect. You go into Full Armor Photon, you can destroy a card on the field. And Dark Matter Dragon makes my opponent banish shit, so... It's a really nice card. The Galaxy Eyes combos have always been really kind to me, so I would definitely recommend running those. So let's get into our side deck here. So first off, we run one copy of Droll Lockbird. I think this is probably the most important hand trap in this format, especially with Thunder Dragons and the Danger Cyberstein FTK that's been floating around since the ban list dropped. That's what I'm running this for, just in case I run into something like that. I would definitely recommend you do the same, as well as 2 copies of Effect Veiler, as I mentioned earlier. These are the only hand traps that we're going to be running in this deck, just because they're the most effective ones, I think. Especially for a lot of the FTKs that you might be facing, you are going to want to go second with this deck, and I think that in regards of getting killed on your first turn, these 3 cards are where you want to be, especially with Dangers floating around still, as well as the new Cyberstein FTK, which does involve Dangers, as well as even like Thunder Dragons, and other decks like that. And then we run one copy of Raw Sphere Mode for link boards that we need we need help with. We run one copy of Shared Ride to help with decks that search a ton. I'm looking at you guys. Spellbooks especially have been kind of making a comeback from what I'm seeing with the new ban list out. I have the one copy of Hey Trunade. This is also for the Altergeist matchup because it sends all set spells and traps back to the hand. So I think this is a really helpful card. You also have the one copy of Mystical Space Typhoon as well. This is actually just because I don't have a second copy of Twin Twisters, so I just run the one MST. If you have the second Twin Twisters, I definitely run it in the side deck. We have the one copy of Red Reboot to negate even like an impermanence or something like that. And then we have 2 Solemn Strikes, a Solemn Warning, and a Solemn Judgment. So the whole brigade we just have right there. This is just to help with negates. You can actually run a lot of these side deck cards like all at once if you want to just kind of go all in with like, I'm going to negate my opponent's entire deck, or I'm going to just solely focus on negating spells and traps and doing damage. Like, this deck is really versatile in that way, and that's what I really love about it. So that's actually going to finish up the deck profile today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Shout out to my Blue Eyes mat, which is actually relevant now for the first time in a deck profile. I am going to be coming at you guys with a rank 10 trains deck profile here in a little bit. Once again, because of the new support that came out, and I really like that deck as well. That's the other deck that I've been playing a lot. And look forward to a lot more things with Nuclear Revolution Gaming. I've been setting up a lot of really cool stuff for you guys, so keep on the watch for that. Thanks for watching this deck profile video, guys, and I'll catch you later. Nuke Rev out.